we'll go ahead and start with the roll call.
Mr. Zollinger,
Here,
Ms. Boyjan. Here. Ms. Levenger. Here. Mr. Strub.
Here.
Mr. Lemuel.
Here.
all right, we have a quorum. All 5 members are present. Keep in mind, 3 out of the 5 will need to vote yes on a motion for any of that action to be taken. Maybe 3 yeses will be necessary. The next item is the minutes of the October 17th, 2022 special meeting. We've been provided those minutes in advance of this, so I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes in a second.
Motion to approve.
Yeah.
Second. Those minutes, I don't think we have. The special meeting from the 17th?
We don't have those yet?
I don't think so. Shannon, you're working on this still, right?
I got something.
I thought I did too.
Oh, maybe it was the actions letter.
Oh, it was the actions.
Oh,
The
that was
transcript
the
from-
actions. Sorry.
All right, we'll hold
Yeah,
off.
you're right.
Okay, then we'll hold off on that till the next meeting. We'll approve that at the next meeting. We'll need those.
Yeah.
We need a transcript to approve that. All right,
Yep,
sorry about
actions.
that. Yeah, I thought I got confused there.
That should have.
That was a long one.
Yeah. Okay, so then the next item then is our action item. So why don't you go ahead and call off what the variance request is, please?
Application number 22 NC ZBOA-0006, Matthew Fall, 1604 Patriots Point Southeast, North Canton, Ohio, 44709. Variance request to allow a pergola to encroach 1 foot into the required 5-foot side setback. North Canton Ordinance Schedule 1133.08, Parent A, Parent 1.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lamley, I believe you had something you wanted to say before we proceeded.
Yes, so I'm going to abstain on this case. I do live in the same neighborhood, although I'm further than 300 feet. I'm also a trustee currently in the neighborhood association, so I feel it's best to abstain.
Okay, you can just, you can, if you're going to remain, then you would just say abstain whenever the vote is called, if there's a motion made. And we'll do that. We still have a quorum with you here. It'll just take 3 out of 4 of us to approve or deny a motion that's made. Okay, with that then, I'll let whoever wants to speak in favor of the variance stand up. You'll notice that a court reporter is taking down everything that we are saying. So it's important that you just speak clearly, avoid nodding of the head,
My
shaking.
husband gave me a talking point, so he couldn't be with us. He's
Okay.
an ER doctor and he had a shift today, but
Okay,
I have to read the talking points, and this is Jonah. He's
Yeah, I'm Jonah. I'm the contractor that.
Okay.
installed the pergola.
well, when you get up, when you go to the
Oh,
podium, and then
Oh,
you'll
And
say
then
your
also-
you'll say your full name for the court reporter when you're up there, and
thank you.
yeah, you're just your
Yeah,
full
can
name
you
and
spell your name, is it Jon
AH
and the last name?
is Waxer, WAKSER.
And your name, please?
It's Jill, Jill Wurzburg, WURZBURG, and I'm married to Matt and. Oh, no.
okay. And the other thing, just to make we might have some questions for you.
Yes,
As you-
Jonah is probably gonna help with some of those questions too.
Okay,
Do you want me to stand up there too, sir?
yeah, that's fine. Just make sure we don't talk over each other. I'll give you every chance to respond, and just it makes her job easier. Is what I'm.
Yeah, sure, no
so.
problem.
All right, so go ahead when you're ready.
Sure, and
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You both need to be sworn in by the court reporter when she's done.
Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And just make sure you don't talk at the same time somebody else is talking. Wait till they're done. Okay? Thank you.
Right, go ahead.
like I said, my husband gave me some talking points.
Okay.
So first, we just want to thank you all for taking the time to meet with us and hear this case. And again, there really is no argument. We agree that the pergola is the 1 foot inside the 5 foot side setback set forth by the ordinance. And our understanding is that that was due to the fact that it was built on loose sand and dirt, and so there may have been some give. And that occurred in those, the boundary line, it went a little further than what we thought. The pergola, however, does sit behind a rock wall, though safety is not of any consideration. And so we had no intention of of getting around this ordinance. Our plan were delivered to our HOA in detail weeks before any construction ensued, and we did, get approval. And then we also obtained the permit as well, and all this was an effort to make sure that the project was done in the correct way and went through all the process to get that done. And the pergola was installed very early in the project, so it was 7 weeks before the completion of the rest of the patio. And so this was done prior to any stone being placed or electric wires installed. And so the complaint about the pergola distance was filed after the majority of the project was actually complete. And so the stone wall, electricity, and cement had already been poured and installed prior to the complaint. And so there was actually no additional construction that had been completed. And so near the pergola, after the complaint was filed, the portion of the project was done. And so on page 2 of the handout, there's actually a picture after the complaint was filed, just so that you kind of get an idea of what we're talking about in the distance. And so we do completely understand the need and the requirement for these ordinance. However, we are now requesting the variance for the following reason. So pergola would be moved 12 inches to the east, which will have no change in overall look for the property, and thus no change on the layout. And then if you look on page 3 of the handout, the inside edge of the pergola post next to the wall will be moved to tape measure. So you'll see that in the picture. That really is what we're discussing, like this much. And so we purposely use a local small business and their subcontractors for the project, and we really wanted to give them a shot and also hopefully get them more business, because we've been very happy with all their work, and we've actually gotten a lot of compliments from the neighbors too on the ultimate product of the patio. And so this will also be a substantial cost for them, obviously, to come and have to redo something that was completed months ago at this point. And so the ordinance is set forth to protect the community and personal property, and we understand.
Ordinance, what, say again?
Oh, sure, it's set forth to protect the community and personal property. And we have a solid reinforced stone wall, as you can see in those pictures, that sits a good distance from our neighborhood property line, and so the pergola sits on the inside of it. Thus, there should be no concern on whether, on any of the safety concerns. And so we are requesting a variance, so this is clearly an accident and there was no ill will involved. We do have the HOA on property, and I talked to the board, and he has no concerns with his basement at this time. And so once again, we really do apologize for this mistake, and we're hoping that we can be granted a variance at this time.
I got a question about the plans. So first of all, it looks like this is 3.5 feet from the line, so it's about 1.5 feet. We're talking about that would have to be moved, right?
I believe that's correct, yes. So, and basically, when I marked out the pergola, I had a false property line that was a little off, and, just with the measuring, it was a true honest mistake, I wasn't out of any ill intentions or anything of that nature. It was an honest mistake.
So, okay, so when the plans were submitted, and I don't know, Mr. Van Gundy can answer this. I mean, I was trying to figure out where this was supposed to be, where the footers of the pergola were supposed to be located.
And I think, if I can interrupt, what I did is when I filed the zoning is I used the Google Maps, and you guys have a Stark County records where I can look up the property and the property lines, and I used the measuring thing, and I was off on that. And I, obviously I was aware of the 5-foot setback, and I thought I was clear of that, but when I did install it, I obviously was encroaching on that 5-foot setback.
Okay. So what is 3.5 feet from the property line? The footing of the pergola or the wall?
So 3.5 feet from the property line would be the footing of the pergola.
With that picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to your book, it is,
It's actually not the footing, there's a little cover that goes over the footing, and that's what's 3.5 inches. So if you took that off, it would probably be closer, that's like a 2 or 3 foot. You see the little thing at the bottom, it's like a decorative, that's about 3 inches, so.
it's this picture right here with the tape measure, and so this is what he's calling that's the footing, is what their fancy term, I guess.
Okay.
What is the required setback for the retaining wall?
So the required setback for the retaining wall, I believe, is 2 feet.
And that is fine. They checked
Yeah.
it when they came out and measured, so there's no issue with that wall.
And I believe, oh, I apologize for interrupting, but Roger is his name, the inspector. He came out and he approved of everything else. He just said, unfortunately, you guys did encroach on that 5-foot setback for the pergola structure, and which I understood. It's an honest mistake.
I mean, was there, I mean, there's nobody else here,
And we did send it out to neighbors. And obviously, we did talk to the homeowner association as well, and so we did send letters letting them know that we're coming here as well.
I mean, I drove out to the property and looked at it, and it does look pretty close to the other neighbor. You don't know if it was your, and maybe if you don't know, say you don't know, but if, was it your next door neighbor that complained, or?
We don't know, because they don't tell you.
Oh, I thought it was the gentleman that inspected it. It wasn't the
No,
inspector that.
the only reason the inspector came out, to my knowledge, was because the complaint was filed.
Okay.
That's what he told us. So, and he couldn't tell us who filed the complaint, so. Yeah, so we don't know who actually complained. But yes, it
Do
would
you know the
be,
wording or the nature of the complaint? I mean, why they were,
do you want my guess would be because of the property line, because I think, and again, we're not, the wall is in compliance with everything.
right,
So I think that our neighbor thought that they had more property than they did. And so we did have someone come out and survey the property, and this is all on our property, so it doesn't
Okay.
matter. Like, so we're not anywhere near his property, or their property, I should say. But yeah, that's my guess, is that they thought their property extended further than what it actually does.
okay.
And the other thing I would say is, after the fact, I even used a pin finder I got, and I found a metal detector, and I marked the actual pins, which obviously in hindsight's 2020, I should have done that previously, but I didn't. So that was truly the mistake right there. Because I thought it was about 12 inches closer to the driveway.
But again, the rock wall is where it's supposed to be.
So the rock wall is about, so the rock wall, I think, so that's a 4-inch block. I think it's about 2.5 feet from the property line. Then you have a 12-inch block, which brings you to that 3 feet from the property. 3.5 feet from the property line. So that's why we're encroaching that. Well, actually, it'd be about 3 foot 8 inches.
Yeah, so we're really just talking about like moving this right here, that everything's on our property. That's not a question anymore, so.
I'm sorry, I mean encroaching on the,
That's setback.
yes,
Is the wall itself is in compliance?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
it's just the pergola, that's
Just,
not.
just the pergola. And basically what we would have to do is we would obviously have to rip up their patio, do the new wiring, pour the new footers, move everything, 12 to 16 inches over, and then redo it that way.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Van Gundy, like what happened with the approval of this? Like I see this schematic, it says 13
Yeah.
feet from pergola to the side lot line. I don't know what
And
is
if you
that?
don't mind me interrupting.
Yeah,
That was me, and like I said, when I took those measurements, I took it online, and this was in pre-stages before we even started. And I was aware of the setback, but my measurement was off on that online, because you can use like a measuring thing and put the property line and put where you believe the pergola is gonna be, and I was incorrect on that.
So as I understand, the site plan is what was submitted for the zoning on that. It was later discovered that this property line shown and the configuration was not accurate.
okay, that's why it says 13 feet.
Right,
Okay,
and the 5-foot, of course, does come from the zoning code section or the schedule cited there, the 113308A1. And I do want to note for the record, staff's concern, and I believe that it was an honest mistake here. the concern staff has is that the variance process could be abused by similar work coming in without a permit and then coming in asking for forgiveness later. So I do want to make sure that whatever we do tonight, we don't set a negative precedence for that.
I mean, that's my concern too, because we've turned these down where somebody said, in fact, it was a gazebo, I think, where we turned it, they erected a gazebo and they didn't come and get a permit. And it was in violation of a rule, and I feel like, I mean, I appreciate what's being said here about it being an honest mistake. I don't have any reason not to believe that. That's not a criteria for granting a variance, unfortunately, under the law. We're not allowed to, honest mistakes, negligence are not bases for this. If the city had approved this, showing it being within 5 feet, that would be another story altogether, but that's not what I'm seeing here.
Did you say that the homeowners association approved this before construction began?
Mhm. I talked to the homeowner board, going through this process too, and she was fine with
Who's
it.
she?
Linda, now I'm terrible with names, so.
Okay.
And if you don't mind me, so when I submitted the zoning permit, what I did is you can see off the side of the house, I came that 10 feet, so it quite truly was an inaccurate property line that I went off of. So like I showed how far off of the house I was going, so like in theory, they knew like how far it was going off the house, but it's just, I put the property line 5 feet or, whatever it was into there. It was,
Well, your schematic, if I'm reading it right, shows the pergola 13 feet from the side lot line. So the city looked at this and said, okay, this thing is 13 feet away from the line, so it's okay, and that's why they approved it.
Yeah.
Chairman, if I may also point out, the measurements appear to be referencing the post or the column for the pergola. It does appear there is an overhang here, which should be considered as an encroachment in that setback as well. I don't see any dimensions for that overhang, so I'm not sure how much the overhang further encroaches into that 5-foot setback.
Yeah.
if you don't mind. I had Roger, the inspector, come out and he said that they don't factor in any overhang. It's only to the post. And that, and that is truly what Roger did say.
Okay.
Might also add the residential code of Ohio does not have a conflict for this request. There is an exception that would apply to this that would allow for that wall essentially to be nearly 100% open. Well, actually less than 100%. It looks like there's some slats. Either way, the residential code of Ohio would not require fire resistant construction due to that encroachment into the setback.
Okay. Other things to consider with the setback thing is not just safety of this thing falling, but possible changing in light, I don't know, shadowing of the neighbor's yard and their inability to possibly grow things. I mean, things like that are things we have to consider when we're looking at this. That's another reason there are setbacks, along with, a more claustrophobic feeling or whatever. There are lots of reasons for setbacks other than safety. And we also have to consider how this would affect people who own that property after the person who lives there now. These variances can last beyond whoever owns it. So that's something else we have to think about when we're making our decision here. This is not a decision I really enjoy. This is not the kind of decision I enjoy making. I got to be really honest with you. Because I understand the practical difficulties if we don't grant this. And I'm also worried about setting a bad precedent, because we've had the situation before and we've said no.
Well, and it would be just like with the landscaping, like we are planning landscape behind it, so it would be for privacy, and we have talked to the neighbor about it, and they'd be there to support that.
So have you talked to your next door neighbor about this pergola now? Did you go to them before this and say we're doing
Well,
this?
Joe actually knew his son from baseball.
Yeah.
So-
Okay,
I went to school with his son, and I even, before I started the project, I drew out the whole thing with him, and I went over and I told him we'll be here for the next 2 months, and if there's absolutely anything you guys need. We had to go into their yard a little bit, which I told him that, and I said, we replant all the grass, we already replanted it, it's already fully grown in. Obviously, I understand from a landscaper's point of view, that shade, it could cast an area but with the slats and everything in the pergola, it does allow a lot of sun through as well, so, but I do completely understand, and I was
Yeah.
made the neighbor very well aware, and, I mean, even every single day, they come home and they talk to us, and we go over what we're doing, and they had, their grandma lived with them too, so she'd always come over and look what we're doing and everything, so.
But yeah, we are planning to put plants or something back there. That was what was there before. There was a wall there before. So, and there was bushes and stuff to give everyone privacy. Otherwise, we stare at each other because their patio's right there. And, fun either.
yeah.
So if you had to move the pergola, I mean, what are we talking
So,
about? In terms of construction work?
So what
cost, and-
yeah, and what I would have to do is, so we completed the project and we got the complaint, so, what I would have to do is I would have to tear up my pavers, and then we cut around, if you can see in the picture, we cut these really cool little like black borders around them. So we would have to remove those, we'd have to redo all the wiring, we'd have to pull up all the pavers that enclose the wiring, and then we'd have to move everything 12 inches, re-pour our footers, dig out a huge hole for, our code footer to go in. We'd have to bury that, all the pavers around it, due to digging them up, those would come into, so it would, we would have to kind of redo a good chunk of the patio for that area, which I understand, and I obviously know that if it doesn't go through, then I'm responsible for doing that, and I'll absolutely make it happen.
But we thought it would be worth
Worth a try.
a try to come and chat, and just, again, it's from a homeowner's perspective, it's this much, right? And like, I don't want him to have that cost either, because it is a lot of work and everything, so.
The landscaping you're talking about, would it be on the other side of the wall?
Yeah, that's our property, so.
It's still your
Yeah.
property, and that's where the landscaping was previously?
Yeah. Mhm.
So you
We
were
had a
just
tree, yeah,
updating it is what you
we're
were doing.
updating our landscaping that was there.
And when I initially started the project, I actually talked to, and he was like, oh, I'm gonna talk to them about splitting the landscape, because it kind of is like our view too,
Mhm.
but it is 100% on their
So there is enough room, and I don't know if you can see it from any of these pictures, but we are putting some more privacy heavily in our plan, so.
I apologize if this was already discussed, but did you say you talked to the neighbor about this?
Mhm.
How did they feel about the location?
So when I talked to the neighbor, I drew out where the patio and everything was going, and they didn't express any issues with me. I know he was a little worried because I had to tear up his grass, but I reassured him that.
Replanted, so
I-
it's not an
it's-
issue,
it's
yeah.
100% Grew too, so it's not like I planted bad grass and it didn't grow, like I made sure I took care of it as best as I possibly could.
And he had never complained to us about the pergola. He, like Jonah said, he offered to split the landscaping so that it could go further on their property, because they actually liked, when we had no wall for a long time, like, just because of other competing priorities for him, they realized how nice it is to have that privacy, because otherwise everyone's looking at them while they're eating, because they don't have any sort of privacy.
So you're gonna put landscaping in that kind of builds a buffer between the two houses and gives privacy?
Yeah, so like I said, we had that before, so it's not anything that's different, but it needs it too, just also within, to kind of fit more also within our house as well. We're tearing up all of our landscaping next year.
Anything else at this point?
No, I mean, I really just want to thank you guys for listening to me and really it.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. I don't know what we're gonna do here yet, but I just want you to know, I mean, whatever we do, it's, you know, I believe everything you're saying personally. I mean, I don't have any reason not to. It has nothing to do with that, but we have other the law requires us to consider certain things that we have to think about. So, anybody have any other questions?
Well, I'm looking at the zoning ordinance here. And it says, okay, reviewing a variance, some of the factors to be considered. Whether the property owner's predicament can feasibly be alleviated through some method other than a variance, whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting a variance, whether the granting the variance request or on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this regulation to other land structures or buildings in the same district. That's 118005 B.
What letter?
B. I think that's what we're supposed to be looking at when we consider whether to grant or deny variance. Those are some sections that kind of pop out at me.
Mr. Vinkin, we're looking at 1133.08, right? That is the ordinance that controls, not 05, because I think the letter from had 05. I want to make sure we have it right. We're looking at the right.
So I said 1180.05, which
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
sets forth the standard we're supposed to apply when considering an application for a variance.
Yeah, I'm just talking, the accessory, that is the standard we have to apply. I was trying to make sure we were looking at we're looking at the accessory use regulations, though.
So here,
11,
1133.08.
1133.08.
yeah, okay.
Correct. 113308, parent A, parent 1 is the schedule there that identifies a setback from specified lot line. And the line item within that schedule would be the unenclosed deck, porch, patio, ramp, steps, or similar structure not exceed, excuse me, it's the next one down. Unenclosed deck, porch, ramp, steps, or similar structure exceeding 3.5 feet in height. And under, going along that row in the column identified as side shows the 5 foot.
Okay.
Beneath it, it says for fences and walls and none. Would that apply to this retaining wall?
That's correct.
So there is, Mr. Wax there
Yes, sir, Wax.
said 2 feet, but it's actually 0 feet, is that right?
2 feet that's correct. 2 feet is a reference to the setback required for driveways to the side property line.
So the retaining wall could have actually been closer to the neighbor's property line here without being in conflict with this variance, or with this regulation, is that correct?
That's correct.
And truly, that's what I did base it on, is because, you know, we had to have that retaining wall, and just for visual looks, and when I did it, I tried to get it as close, because it just was the most appealing, obviously, to not only the use of the patio space, but I think to just the structure of the patio. We put it, you know, even 12 inches, I know it really doesn't make much of a difference, but it just would have, in my eyes, just from, you know, I like things to look perfect.
How much further over could the retaining wall have been and still been in compliance?
It could have been right on the
Yeah,
property
right
line.
on.
So you've got, you said 2.5 feet?
Yeah, so the blocks are 8 inches in width. So the blocks are 8 inches and it was, 2.5, I think it was about 2.5 to 3 feet off of it. I can't remember exactly, but I know we had plenty of room and clearance. He said that's not of any concern. He said literally if you move this over just this bit, this would have never been an issue. Did say that we're looking to.
He did.
He was very complimentary of the
Yeah,
work.
he was. I like him. He's just
Yeah.
doing his job.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions? Comments? Thoughts?
Just thinking out loud with the homeowner association rules versus like our zoning rules. Because I know, I mean, thinking just about, I know we have a little niche community in town that kind of does their own rules. I can't think of the name of it, but you know what I'm talking about, out of Easton.
The Dells?
The
Thank
Dells,
you.
Yeah, they're not in the city though. Yeah, they're not part of the city, or unless they were in it. They still aren't part of the
They
city.
annexed themselves out years ago, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I believe
Okay.
so.
Yeah, they're not part of the
But
city.
just in general, when you have HOA approval, and then you have us, do we still not go out and check then prior to build, or are we just going off of a drawing?
So
Because I know we used to
typically,
go out and check, so I guess that's my question.
typically the application would be accompanied with a site plan that's reviewed for code compliance, whether or not we can issue the permit in
Okay.
accordance with the zoning. And then an inspection would be scheduled by the applicant on that. And the HOA rules do get, can be confusing in that often we do receive concerns for HOA violations. And although as a courtesy, we'll advise the applicant to refer to their HOA for a review of the proposed project, but we've had projects that met the zoning code, but were in direct conflict of the HOA rules, and were even advised ahead of the approval that they were in conflict of the HOA rules, but because it's a civil matter, we were obligated by law to issue the approval because it met the zoning code. And again, we simply put in writing, we recommend you contact your HOA for your HOA rules. So they knew ahead of time that, they might have a conflict there.
Okay.
And, but yeah, unfortunately, we cannot enforce any of the HOA regulations.
So here we're just on the opposite, where
Right.
HOA is saying this is okay, but it does not meet ours because
Right, yep.
this is still in the city limits.
If you don't mind me asking, you said, because just for me to learn, obviously I'm young and I'm learning still, but when I submit a permit, should I have an inspection prior to any installation, like with footers, or how does that work? Or do they just go purely off of my permit that I submitted? They don't inspect anything prior?
We will come out and do a site visit ahead of time if there's questions, and, particularly if we're advised that, hey, we're uncertain of whatever the situation may be. In this case, if there was a question as to the property lines, we generally make the recommendation to have a surveyor come out and locate the property corners and pull a string line between those two corners so we can get a positive measurement off of that property line. And we have done that ahead of time when it has been requested. So we certainly, and we don't charge extra for that. We charge the same permit fee. Typically, permit fees are associated with the number of inspections required, but something along those lines, we'd much rather come out and, provide assistance on it and have it done correctly the first time and not, go through the pains of trying to remedy a violation after the fact.
Yeah, and that's, I guess that's probably something I definitely should have considered, is asking them to survey it. I did call the zoning, the North Canton, and they told me I had to rent, like, I actually used like a metal detector. So I just, I did my best job. I picked up beeps everywhere, but I could hone in on like, okay, this is definitely something here, like, so, I mean, based on my map and everything and what I had on my online resources, I got it as close as I possibly could.
And that makes sense for a newer development. Typically, the newer developments will have the property corners in place. Gravity does take its toll and it does pull those below the surface, and you may have to dig 6-8 inches to get to them, but the metal detector, renting something, a tool along those lines is of course much cheaper than hiring the surveyor to come out. But in some of the older parts of the town, those property corners may not be there any longer. They may not have been placed there, and in those cases, you would generally have to hire a surveyor to place new pins in that situation. So it makes sense that that recommendation was made for the newer development of Monticello.
I know we've asked this already, but just for clarification, at the time that they installed, they did have a permit that had been accepted, and they had a plan that the homeowners association accepted.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is correct, but the plan that that the city approved showed the pergola being 13 feet from the property line, so that's why it was approved. It wasn't within the 5 feet that it actually was constructed in. So that's why I asked that question. I was wondering about that myself, so.
And you're 100% right, that's the case. I did it online and
Yeah, and I appreciate you, being forthcoming about all this. For me, one of these factors that Mr. Streb mentioned in 1180 is, there can't be any, is whether there's any fault on the part of the landowner or by extension, the contractor, the landowner. If there was no fault, then that would be something we could consider. So that's what makes this decision tough for me. Anyway, if anybody has any more comments or questions or wants to make a motion.
And
Oh,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing, I apologize, is on that plan, does it show that my wall is coming 10 feet away from the house?
I-
I don't know if you guys have the zoning permit that I submitted, but that's where it would be.
Yeah.
If it says I come 10 feet away from the house and then I corner over,
Yeah, the wall goes 10 feet out.
Mhm.
and then in that picture, does it have the pergola up against the wall?
It's 12 by 12 structure.
Yeah,
So yeah, it truly was just when I took that thing online, I must have clicked.
Oh, that's
It's hard to use online. I don't know if you guys have ever used it. I use
No.
it quite often, actually, but maybe I should stop using it.
yeah. I mean, I don't know anything about how that works. I would, in the future, I would be real careful with
Yeah.
where the property lines are, even in new developments. It's not always clear. All right, anybody else have anything? Anybody want to make a motion? Nobody wants to make a motion?
Well, I
This
one more
one-
thought.
Oh, go ahead.
The other pergola incident, that was right on the street
Yeah.
and really close to the sidewalk. And it was so obvious that it was not anywhere near setback where
It
it should have
blocks
been.
sight, it,
Yeah,
Well, there was no permit at all,
at all.
correct. They didn't
Yeah.
apply for a permit.
and there was a gazebo.
Yep,
This one, I also drove by, we drove by both sides, around the corner. It doesn't jump out at you as though, oh, that's really wrong.
Yeah,
And it seems like if the wall were moved to where it could be, then wouldn't the pergola be okay? But,
Yeah, I feel like this one just feels different to me because of where the wall is.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Jude, do you have any comments
I
on
see a
that?
lot of differences between this one and the
Yeah,
other one, which I abstained from.
Uh,
I got homeowner approval, homeowner association approval. Went through all the necessary steps. There's a wall in place. They're gonna put landscaping in place. The neighbor doesn't have a problem with it. It's not an enclosed structure. It's, a pergola with slats and columns and.
Yeah, I mean,
What, 18 inches?
well, I mean, one thing that, yeah, it does, the fact that there's nobody here complaining about it,
And
Yeah.
I kind of,
and you notified.
We did notify everyone, neighbors watching the kid.
yeah.
All
okay.
across the street, so
Yeah.
he said, oh, I know where you're going.
Yeah. I know we were at that meeting, I think we met with them twice, if I recall, for the other one.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that situation was just really unique, where that would have set a precedent
Yeah,
that would have impacted a lot of things, where this is under an HOA, it's a different neighborhood. And I could foresee if that precedent would be set, that would make sense. And those types of neighborhoods,
yeah,
because you're bettering the area. It's solid landscape, and again, it's behind a patio. A nice constructed patio that is within the parameters
Mhm.
that we have in our ordinance.
Mhm.
So if you want a motion, I would make a motion to approve.
okay. Oh, yeah, well, you're,
I'll second that.
okay. So we're gonna do a vote here on a roll call, just so you know what's gonna be happening. And four of us, Mr. Streb, Ms. Clevenger, Ms. Boykin, and myself will vote. We each have our own vote. So it'll take 3 out of 4 of us to approve the motion. If it's 2 out of 2 to 2, it fails. We need a majority to take action, because Mr. Lamuel is abstaining. Apparently, we'll see for sure in a minute. So go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Zollinger,
Yes.
Ms. Clevenger,
yeah.
Ms. Boykin,
Yes.
Mr. Strub,
Yes.
Mr. Lemuel.
Abstain?
Okay, so with 4 yeses and 1 abstention, the variance is granted. So thank you. Please be careful from now on.
Yeah.
Be more
We
careful.
learned so many lessons from that.
Thank you guys so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Don't
Thank you.
use online.
I will. Never happen again.
All right, with any further action, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Oh.
Any-
Wait,
Oh, yeah, I'll do a voice vote on a motion to adjourn. Second, any second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned
Okay.
and off the record.